Rabbi Zulgesunsen began the Farbrengen this afternoon that it is Shabbos Mevorchim today. Though it is similar to all the other Shabbos Mevorchims in the entire year, however, every month has its specialty. And when we're talking about the Shabbos Mevorchim of Sivn, to find the specialty of the month of Sivn is very obvious. This is the month of Matan Torah. The Rebbe says, we have to understand all of these inyanim and understand it to an extent that it should have an effect as far as a hiroah, as far as a lesson which is brought down into reality. True, there's a concept in Torah of gzeira gazarti, chukah chokakti, vein locharishus laharacha. There are certain inyanim in Torah which we know that the Rebbe has told us to do so, and we do so, and we have no afterthoughts, and we don't know the reason what we're doing, why we're doing this. On the other hand, there are other inyanim in Torah, which Torah is hi chochmaschem ubinaschem. The whole inyan of Torah is that Torah is an inyan of chochma and bina. It's an inyan of a wisdom and an understanding. So there are many inyanim in Torah which we have to understand them. The same when we're talking about the specialty of this month. This is an inyan which could be understood to everyone, to adults, and even brought down to children. The children should understand it on their level as well. And the Rebbe continued, when we bench the new month, we always stress when Rosh Chodesh is going to be. For example, today, we stress that Rosh Chodesh Sivan will be on this coming Friday. What is the inyan of Rosh Chodesh? In general, the inyan of Rosh Chodesh is, Chassidus explains at length, why is it called Rosh Chodesh and not Tchilas HaChodesh, not the beginning of the month, but it is rather called the head of the month? Just like a head contains within it the entire body and rules over the entire body, the same thing, the Rosh Chodesh, when we bench the Rosh Chodesh, it is because the Rosh Chodesh contains within it the entire month. However, it is behelem, it is not seen, it is not obvious, but really when we're talking on Rosh Chodesh, the Rosh has a shaychus to the entire month. But if we go more specific, and particularly this month, there's the inyan in Rosh Chodesh Sivim itself. What is the inyan of Rosh Chodesh Sivim itself? The inyan of Rosh Chodesh Sivim is that is the day when all the Yidden arrived on Har Sinai. And it's spelled out in the Pasuk. Pasuk tells us, Vayichan Shom Yisrael Neged Ahar, that all the Yidden have rested there, opposite the mountain. And there's the famous Chazal. What Chazal tell us that the Pasuk should have used the expression Vayachanu, they have camped, they have rested. And the Pasuk uses the expression of singular. Vayichan, he rested. So Rashi comments on behalf of Chazal, Ki ish echad b'leiv echad, that all of Klal Yisrael was so united that the achdus, the unity amongst Klal Yisrael, when they came to Matan Torah, was to such an extent that it was ki ish echad b'leiv echad. They were all united totally like one person and one heart. So what is the inyan that Rosh Chodesh Sivim expresses? Rosh Chodesh Sivim expresses the great achievement of unity, of achdus. With this we can understand what we just said in the Haggadah. In the Haggadah we said, we mentioned we are now still in the middle of the days of Sfira. And the days of Sfira come as a continuation to Pesach. Pesach, when we all recited the Haggadah at the Seder. In the Haggadah we say, Ilu kervonu lefnei Har Sinai, v'loi nosan lanu es ha-Torah dayenu. If the Rebbe would have brought us to Har Sinai, and would have not given us the Torah, this in itself would also be sufficient. What is the meaning behind this? What does it mean? What is the whole inyan of Har Sinai? The whole inyan of Har Sinai is Torah. Here we say, if he would have brought us to Har Sinai and would have not given us the Torah, it would have also been enough. But the meaning of this is, the accomplishment of Har Sinai was the fact that Yidden were brought up to such a level of unity, to such a level of achdus. And this is what we are saying. If the Rebbe would have brought us to Har Sinai, and he wouldn't have given us the Torah, this in itself would have been sufficient. Why? Because by coming close to Har Sinai, here we have learned a tremendous inyan, we have learned the inyan, we have accomplished something outstanding, the greatness of unity, the greatness of Achdus. This is also what Rabbi Akiva says. Rabbi Akiva is also, as an Abin Yeshayachas to these days, to the days of Sfirat, days after Lag Ba'ima. Rabbi Akiva tells us, regarding Avos Yisrael, Zehu Kol HaTorah Kula, that Avos Yisrael is the entire Torah. V'idach, everything else that's discussed in Torah, Rabbi Akiva says, Pirushahui, is an explanation, is a commentary on Avos Yisrael. So this shows us not that this is a general thing, and everything else is additional details, or other inyanim. It is much more than that. Everything else which is discussed in Torah, besides the inyan of Avos Yisrael, is an explanation on Avos Yisrael. So this shows us how great Avos Yisrael is. Therefore, the Rebbe concluded the lesson which we take from this Shabbos Mevachim is a very obvious one. The importance of Avos Yisrael, that the Rebbe always stresses not only Avos Yisrael, but Achdus Yisrael. Not only do we have to love every Yid, but we have to come to a madrega of total unity amongst Yidden. And when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and this is said by every person, and adults as well as children, we express the unity of the Rebishter. The unity of the Rebishter goes hand in hand with the unity of Bnei Yisrael, with the Achdus of Yidden. In Torah, the Rebbe says, Achdus is not so much stressed. Why? Because in the learning of Torah, we find differences of opinion. We find one Tana will say one way, other Tana will say another way. And what are we told? That Elu va'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. Whatever each one of them says are the words of the Rebishter. Both opinions are Torah. Or as many opinions as we will have, they are all Torah. However, where is the stress of unity? The stress of unity we find by the Rebishter, and the same thing by Yid. So now that we are before Matan Torah, we are in these days, it is the lesson which we take from all of this is the importance of the inyan of Avos Yisrael. And this is something which we have to practice it ourselves, and as well as relate it to others. Here the Rebbe referred back to last week's Sedra. Last week's Sedra we discussed the inyan of Emer. Emer va'amarto, there's a double expression Emer. What does this show? Lehazhir gedolim alaktanim. It makes responsible the adults, that the adults have to caution the youngsters, that the youngsters should also be familiar and know what to do. So we discussed last week the taich that lahazir doesn't only mean to warn, but lahazir means to bring lichtigkeit, to illuminate, based on the word zohar. V'hamaskilim yazhiru ki zohar harakira. Yazhiru is an expression, Yazhiru Zohar is an expression of illumination, shining. So the Rebbe is teaching today that when adults the older ones will excel in Avos Yisrael to the extent that they will be Zohar in Avos Yisrael, Lahazhir Gedolim, they will be, their Avos Yisrael by them will be in a level of illumination. In other words, they will really excel in it. Then this will automatically affect that the Ktanim, the youngsters, they also will follow in this path of Avos Yisrael, and Avos Yisrael will become Avos Yisrael, and Achdus Yisrael will become part of the Ktanim as well. This, the Rebbe says, is regarding the month which we are entering. Regarding the Chazarah which we read today, so today we read the Chazarah of Behar-Bechukosai. Rabbi always stresses, whenever we read two Chazarahs, that on the Shabbos that we read the two Chazarahs, these two Chazarahs really become one Chazarah. To prove of it, that the person who was called up to Revi, to the fourth Aliyah in the Torah, the fourth Aliyah is always the Aliyah which combines the two Chazarahs. His beginning, his bracha rishona he makes in the first Sedra, like in this week he will make it in Behar, and the bracha achrona he makes in Bechukosai. So this shows us that it's one aliyah, and one aliyah has a bracha at the beginning and a bracha at the end. And here we see that the bracha at the beginning is made in one Sedra, and the end bracha, the closing bracha, is made in another Sedra. What does this show us? This shows us that it really becomes one Sedra. What is the inyan of Behar and Bechukosai now that we have them combined? Behar means a mountain. What is the meaning of a mountain? But it says, it's brought in Svarim. We know that there are 4 categories in the world. The world is divided into Doimim, Tzemeach, Chai, and Medaber. There's Doimim, which is rocks and stones, earth. Tzemeach is things that grow, plants, growth. Chai is what speaks, and Medaber, in other words, animals, everything else that goes into that category. And then we have the 4th and the highest category is the Medaber, the person. So it is brought in Svarim that Har, a mountain, is a combination of Tzemeach and Doimim. It is a piece of earth, which is actually Doimim. However, being that it grew, it's a growth out of Doimim, so it is considered Tzemeach Shebe Doimim. This is how Svarim discuss the inyan of a Har, the inyan of a mountain. Hagam the Rebbe says, the way it's discussed in science, it seems, it doesn't seem that way. On the contrary, because science explains that we have to see to it that the mountains remain a mountain, and that mountains could fall apart through winds or through water and so forth. The Rebbe says this not only is explained in science, but it also it agrees to how Torah views the same minyan. Torah also, there's an expression which the Rebbe quoted, that winds, strong winds, could blow that strong that they will have an effect on the mountain and blow off parts of the mountain. However, on the other hand, just like winds could blow off parts of the mountain, the same thing being when a wind blows, a wind could blow and blow to the mountain and add to the mountain as well. Memela, when a wind adds to the mountain, here is reflected the concept which is explained in Svarim, how a mountain is the Tzemeach Shebe Doimim. It is Doimim, and at the same time it grows, because through the power of the winds, when winds blow onto the mountains, it becomes Tzemeach Shebe Doimim. Obviously, the Rab Nosson tells us that everything which the Rebishter created in the world, the Rebishter created in a person similar. Memela, there's an inyan of a mountain within a person. What is the inyan of a mountain within a person? This is the concept of hisnasus. When a person feels that he is uplifted, when a person feels himself upgraded, this is the inyan of a mountain. This is how Chassidus explains it at length, but the basis on it isn't the obvious Rab Nosson. This can be used in a negative way, naturally. There's the whole inyan of gaiva, which is not appreciated, which is a negative, Torah does not appreciate. However, there could be a concept that when a person feels uplifted, and feels higher, feels elevated, and this elevation could help him at times also in serving the Rebishter. It's a famous story, the Rebbe didn't mention it today, but it's a story, it's based on a pasuk, Vayigba liboy b'darkei Hashem, the pasuk says. A person uplifted him, Yigba liboy, he picked up his heart, and this helped him to serve the Rebishter. The Rebbe mentioned it many times, that there was a Chazarah of the Alter Rebbe. Chazarah of the Alter Rebbe would make many times, he would make a calculation to himself and would say, I am a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and I am so close to the Alter Rebbe. How is it befitting for me to do such and such a thing? It's not proper that I should do this and this thing. So what led to this result that he should stay away from doing certain things? It's an approach of gaiva, it's an approach of hisnasus. In other words, he made a realization, came to a realization that he is a Talmud, a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And being that he's a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, it's not appropriate for him to do this and this thing. And the same the Rebbe is teaching. Today he's talking the same minyan. Just didn't refer to the story, but the story gives us a little bit of light in understanding this. That a person could come through a feeling of hisnasus and hagbah, in other words, uplifting himself. And dafke, because of that, this will keep him away from certain things. So we have how the inyan of Behar can be utilized in Kedusha. Taka, a mountain, taka, the expression of elevation, but the inyan of elevation in a positive way. What is the inyan of Bechukosai? Bechukosai is the contrary. Bechukosai means a choik. These mitzvahs, which we do not have a reason for them, we do not understand the reason for them, we do not know the reason. Furthermore, Chassidus teaches, what is the inyan of chakika? Chakika means engraving. What is the difference when something is written or something is engraved? So Chassidus explains, when something is written, the ink, the paper, the parchment, or whatever you write on, are two separate things. And therefore it could fade, could be erased. What is engraving? When we engrave, we combine the letters and on what it is engraved, that it becomes one thing. And as a result of that, it could never part, it could never be erased. What does Chassidus teach in Bechukosai Teileichu? That a Yid has to become so attached with Torah to such an extent that it has to be in a way of chakika, in a way of engraving. In other words, that Torah, mitzvahs, and a Yid become united, become one. This is the inyan of Bechukosai. So obviously, the approach and the lesson which Bechukosai teaches us and what Bechukosai demands from us is a completely different inyan than what Behar demands from us. Behar is an expression how a Yid is uplifted, how a Yid is upgraded, elevated, and we say that he has to utilize this approach to serve the Rebishter. Bechukosai is a contrary approach. Bechukosai shows how a Yid for himself is nothing, and he is totally, in other words, Torah and mitzvahs and him become engraved, and they become one, they become united. What does the combination of Behar and Bechukosai teach us? To combine both of these avodas. That a Yid should take the avodah of Behar, which is the avodah which is an expression of elevation. In other words, he looks at himself that he is elevated, and he's taka elevated. And he's using out these talents which the Rebishter gave him, which is an expression of elevation. He's using this all to serve the Rebishter. However, in what way is he using all this to serve the Rebishter? To such an extent, to an extent of Bechukosai. Meaning to an extent of chakika, to an extent of engraving. Meaning that he becomes totally united with whatever he's doing. And himself, Torah mitzvahs, and the Rebishter become totally united as well. This is what we derive from the combination of Behar and Bechukosai. Later the Rebbe continued interpretation of a Rashi in this week's Sedre, as well as a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos and the Rambam. As far as the Rashi, Rebbe learned the Rashi in Parshas Behar. Parshas Behar, the Torah discusses the importance of observing Shemitah. The importance of Shemitah. Then the pasuk goes ahead, expresses itself. One pasuk before Sheni or before Shlishi, whatever you want to, depending if it's combined or not. Kapitel Chafhei pasuk Yudches. Pasuk concludes, "Va'asisem es chukoisei ves mishpatai." You will do my chukois and my mishpatim. You will fulfill my commandments. V'asisem es chukoisei ves mishpatai tishmeru, and you will listen to, adhere to my mishpatim. V'asisem oisem, and you will do them. V'yishaftem ala oretz lavetach. Then the Rebishter says that on the land which I am entering you, in the land of Eretz Yisrael, you will sit there in security, secured. If we look into Rashi, Rashi explains, what does it mean you will sit, be secured on the land, on Eretz Yisrael? Rashi explains, Sheba Oven Shemitah Yisrael Goyla. It is through the sin of Shemitah that Yidden go into exile, Yidden go into Golus. Rashi quotes a pasuk, Shenema, Os tirtza ha'oretz ha'shapsiseha, v'hirtzasa ha'shapsiseha. Then Rashi goes on with something else. Shivim shana shall golas Bavel, to 70 years that we want to act in exile in Bavel and Babylonia. Keneged shivim shmita shebit lahoyu. This is against 70 shmitas during the years of the first temple, which the Yidden did not keep. So the punishment came accordingly, that 70 years we were in exile. What does this show us? This shows that for not keeping Shemitah, we go into Golus. Rashi is explaining the pasuk here. Why is Rashi's inyan, as the Rebbe always keeps on stressing, is first and foremost to explain Pshat, Pshuta Shel Mikra, the simple interpretation of the pasuk, so that a 5-year-old child who's learning Chumash should understand the pasuk. Of what importance is it to get involved and tell us why the Yidden were 70 years in exile in Bavel? That the 70 years that they were in exile in Bavel, this corresponds to the 70 years which they did not observe Shemitah during the days of the first Beis HaMikdash. Once we start looking into this pasuk, there are other questions that arise. The beginning of the Seder, the Torah Taka discussed Shemitah, then the Torah discusses Yovel. Once in 7 years, once in 50 years. Then the pasuk, we come to pasuk Yudches. Pasuk Yudches tells us, V'asisem, that we shall fulfill the chukim of the Rebishter, and adhere and fulfill the mishpatim, and do them all. And by doing that, V'shaftam ala haaretz lebetach, on the land which the Rebishter has taken us into, we will be there in a definite and secure way. What shaykhs does this pasuk have to Shemitah? What relation does this have to Shemitah? Obviously, this has nothing to do with Shemitah. This pasuk discusses the general commitment from Yidden of observing all the chukim and all of the mishpatim. Why does Rashi tie it into Shemitah? The Rebbe says that there are the various commentaries on Rashi and on Chumash, who discuss this inyan, but let us approach it from the most simple way, from looking at the pasuk. Pasuk uses the expression of Asisem es chukoisai ves mishpatai tishmahu. You will do all of my chukim and all of my mishpatim. This has nothing to do with which was discussed previously regarding Shemitah and Yovel. Furthermore, to prove this, let us go back one pasuk. Pasuk says v'lo yisoinu ishes hamisai, that we should not fool one another. That there has to exist honesty between one person and another. Nobody's going to tell you that this pasuk has any special stress regarding Shemitah. This pasuk is applicable during all the years. It's a pasuk that's telling us how we have to be honest one to another. And in fact, as Rashi tells us, based on Chazal, this is einoas devarim, an honesty in words. In other words, basically, if somebody comes to ask for an advice, don't give them a false advice, don't mislead him. Make sure that the words which you express to your friend are honest and truth. This has no shaykhs to Shemitah, definitely. Now that when we go to the next pasuk, we go to pasuk Yudches, it's also a general pasuk. V'asisem es chukoisai, do all of my commandments, ves mishpatai tishmeru, v'asisem oisam, and the Rebishter will reward us. V'shaftam ala haaretz levetach. So why does Rashi tie this in with Shemitah? Rashi goes back. You should know what guarantees remaining in Eretz Yisrael observing Shemitah. If we do not observe Shemitah, this will lead to exile. Finished. We're not talking about Shemitah anymore. We're talking about Chukoisai and Mishpat, all of Chukim and all of Mishpat. So the Rebbe is learning as follows. The Rebbe is learning Pshat in the Pasuk. Pasuk is telling us, V'asisem es Chukoisai, we will listen to all the Chukim of the Rebishter. Ves Mishpatai Tishmeru, we will follow his Mishpatim. V'asisem oisam. V'shaftem ala haaretz lebetach, and we will be secured on the land which the Rebishter will bring us in the land of Eretz Yisrael. What takes us back, we find by Yaakov Avinu, the Rebishter has promised Yaakov that he will guard him, he will protect him and his children. Then we find that Yaakov came and asked again from the Rebishter protection. The Rebbe has promised it. Chazal tell us there that Yaakov was afraid. Shema yigrem hachet. True, the Rebbe promised him. However, maybe he has sinned, and being that he sinned, he's done certain averes, so this will lead to it that the commitment from the Rebbe to protect him and his children will no longer be there. What do we derive from this? That the inyan of an avera, inyan of a chet, can lead to it, that the pledge of the Rebbe of guarding us and being in charge of us and taking care of us can be reduced through averes. Now here we are told that we have to listen to all the chukim of the Rebbe. And the pasuk taki here is talking in general about all the mitzvahs and observing all the mitzvahs. But Rashi is telling us, you should know, there is one specific avera which has one mitzvah, by not keeping it an avera, which has a special sensitivity. That if we will not keep this mitzvah properly, this mitzvah protects us in Eretz Yisrael, and by not keeping it properly, this takes us out of Eretz Yisrael, this leads to Golus. So the pasuk here is not talking about Shemitah, we're already into a new inyan. And the pasuk is telling us, Vasisem Echukosai v'smishpatai tishmaru vasisem es. V'yishaftem al haaretz levetach. And if we will follow the mitzvahs of the Rebbe, we will be guaranteed and protected in Eretz Yisrael. However, you should know that amongst all the mitzvahs, there is one mitzvah which has a special like secret in that mitzvah. That when we observe that mitzvah properly, we will be in Eretz Yisrael. And by not observing that mitzvah properly, this takes us and leads to Golus. To prove this point, Rashi has to continue with the rest of what he tells us. Behar-Bechukosai, look what happened after the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. The destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and the reason why Yidden went into Golus, they definitely did other sins as well. There were other things which went wrong. It wasn't only Shemitah. However, why were they 70 years in Golus, and not 69, and not 71, exactly 70? This is because of another area which they were very weak in. They neglected the inyan of Shemitah. And being that they neglected Shemitah, and how many Shemitahs? 70 Shemitahs they did not observe. That is why the Golus which they went into right then after was exactly 70 years. And this shows to prove the point that the inyan of Shemitah protects our being in Eretz Yisrael, and at the same time not observing Shemitah, transgressing Shemitah, not fulfilling the mitzvah of Shemitah, leads to Golus. Now that the child is learning Chumash here, may worry. He will start thinking, when will he remain in Eretz Yisrael? It is only if Shemitah will be adhered to properly. If Shemitah will not be adhered to properly, then Chas v'Shalom could lead to Golus. Let us look into the next pasuk. Right away in pasuk Yutes, the following pasuk, we have another pasuk. V'nosna haaretz pirya, the land will give its fruit v'achaltam l'seiva, and we will eat, we will have enough. V'yishaftam l'betach aleh, and we will be definitely remain in Eretz Yisrael. It's the same expression as we just had in the previous pasuk, the same l'betach. Obviously, it would mean the same meaning. If we look into Rashi in pasuk Yutes, we will see Rashi teaches l'betach. What does l'betach mean? Shaloi tidagu mishnas b'tzoyres, that you shouldn't have to worry from hunger years. Why can't l'betach here mean the same as it meant a pasuk ago? Pasuk ago it meant that if you will observe Shemitah, you will remain in Eretz Yisrael. If you will not observe Shemitah, it will lead to Golus. So in other words, Rashi here is like teaching the child who is learning Chumash. I just taught you, Rashi says, that ba'oven Shemitah, through the sin of Shemitah, it leads into Golus. So now the child will be worried. He'll be worried if the Yidden will observe Shemitah or not. And if Chas v'Shalom they will not observe Shemitah, the child who is not Yisrael now, who knows where he will be, where he could wind up being later if Shemitah is not observed properly. Now that the pasuk says again, gives another promise, v'yishaftem l'betach aleha, that you will be protected in Eretz Yisrael. Different kind of a promise. Here it's a promise that you wouldn't have to worry for years from hunger. As far as worrying for the observance of Shemitah, the child is stuck worrying about that.
Pasuk is not promising us v'shaftem lovetach aleh without worries regarding to Shemitah. Because you have to worry. Make sure that Shemitah is observed properly. And if Shemitah is not observed properly, it could lead to Golus. Then now that when there's another repeat in the Pasuk, v'shaftem lovetach aleh, with the additional repeat in the Pasuk, this is another bracha, but it doesn't mean the same bracha. It means a different one. Worry for the first inyan, and also the Pasuk tells us, v'shaftem lovetach aleh, that the Rebbe will not bring any years of hunger. The Rebbe always discusses in the Farbrengen an inyan on the commentary of his father on the Zohar, on the weekly portion. The Zohar, which was discussed in today's Farbrengen, is also on this pasuk. There's an interesting Zohar here, which is brought commentary of the Rebbe's father, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak. Pasuk says, "Va'asisem es chukosai," you will do my chukim. Ves mishpatai tishmurun, you will adhere to my mishpatim. Now we all know that a choik means a mitzvah which we don't understand. Mishpatim means the mitzvahs which we do understand. The Zohar says as follows: Es chukosai do Torah shebal peh. What does choik mean? Choik has a shaykhs to Torah shebal peh, to the oral Torah. What does mishpatai mean? Do Torah shebiksav. This is Torah shebiksav, the written Torah. So the Rebbe asks a question: how can the Zohar say that choik means Torah shebal peh? In other words, Torah shebal peh, he's comparing to a choik. A choik is a mitzvah which we don't understand. Mishpatai, the mitzvahs which we do understand, he's comparing to Torah shebiksav. Let us look into a halacha. There's a halacha. If one would say, we know that if one would say Torah, every day we recite a special bracha on Torah, Birchas Torah, Baruch Atah Hashem Le'isna Torah, we say it every morning. Now if one would say Torah shebiksav and not understand it, there's nothing wrong. The written Torah, and we learn it, we say it, and we don't understand it, there's nothing wrong. If one would say the written Torah, Torah shebal peh, and would not understand it, then we are not fulfilling the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. The mitzvah of Talmud Torah has to be fulfilled when we understand that we are learning Torah. So as far as the written Torah, there we are obligated to understand whatever we learn. As far as the oral Torah, thank you. As far as the written Torah, there it could be a inyan in which we don't understand, because it's higher than our understanding at times, and still, it is considered that we have fulfilled the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So if the Zohar wants to compare Chayk and Mishpat to Torah shebiksav and Torah shebal peh, he should have done it the contrary way, and not the way he does it, because Chayk does not have a shaykhs to Torah shebal peh. Chayk is an expression, a thing which we don't know the reason. It's the same idea as saying something which we don't understand. Where do we fulfill the mitzvah of Talmud Torah? When we say something and we don't understand it, we fulfill it only in the mitzvah of Torah shebiksav, not in Torah shebal peh. So it's a Zohar which requires interpretation. The Rebbe did give an answer, but it was a long answer which he tied it into an interpretation of Pirkei Avos, which he gave last week on the Mishnah of Shloisha Ksarim Heim. Just a very interesting question, which I figured I would let us share it, let us mention it. As far as the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that today is the 5th Perek. In the 5th Perek, there's a Mishnah. Mishnah tells us about things which the Rebishter created Bein Hashmashos. On Friday, Bein Hashmashos. Mishnah Vav, the 6th Mishnah. Asara Dvarim, there were 10 things which were created Erev Shabbos at twilight. And the Mishnah tells us what they are. The opening of the earth, Pia Be'er, Pia also in the mouth of the donkey, which corresponded with Bilam many years later, Hakeshes, Vahamon, Vahamate, Vahashamir. The Mishnah goes on, Eloi Shel Avram Avinu, the ram which Avram used to bring as a Kolm instead of his son Yitzchak. All of these things were created Friday, before the entrance of Shabbos, Friday at twilight. In general, Pirkei Avos, the Rebbe always keeps on stressing, based on what the Gemara tells us, is Mila de Chasidusa. It's words of Chasidus. In other words, a device of such inyanim which can give us guidance in serving the Rebishter, but not the type of guidance which we are required to based al pi halacha, based al pi shulchan aruch. Something which is beyond the halachic requirement. Lifnim mishuras adin. As this is what the Gemara refers to it as Mila de Chasidus, in Yonim which a chassid would do. In other words, beyond the requirement of halacha, above that. Rabbi says, what kind of lesson can we derive from a Mishnah that tells us that there were 10 things which the Rebishter created Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos? Now, Rabbi says there are also other questions in the contents of the Mishnah. What does it mean that the Rebishter created the Ram of Avram Erev Shabbos Bein Hashmashos? In other words, the first Friday of creation, he created the ram. So this ram, when it was used, when Avram used it, must have been a very old one. Extremely old. Rabbi says if there are various commentaries on Mishnah that raise this question, and they come to a conclusion, and they say that it doesn't mean that the Rebishter Taka created it then, it means that the Rebishter gave it thought then. It had room in the Rebishter's machshava at that, in the Rebishter's thought at that time. Rabbi says Mishnah speaks extremely precise and clear. Mishnah uses the expression Nivru be'erev Shabbos. It was created Erev Shabbos. We can't say that creation means something which the Rebishter thought of and really was created many, many years later. Same thing same question would apply when we're talking about the mouth of the donkey which came into contact with Bilam. If we are to learn Nivru bein Hashmashos, Erev Shabbos bein Hashmashos, it must have also been a very old donkey. These questions the Rebbe raised regarding the Pshat in the Mishnah. But regarding the lesson, what we can derive from this Mishnah, the Rebbe says it's a very obvious one. The lesson which we derive from here, what the Mishnah here is out to teach us, Erev Shabbos bein Hashmashos, it's the time of twilight. It's Friday, going into Shabbos. How long is the time of bein Hashmashos? How long is this time of twilight? Mara uses the expression, it's keheref. It's a very brief time. It's a split second. It's not a long time. It's not a set period of time which takes long. It's a very short time. What does the Mishnah show us? The importance of time. How a person is supposed to utilize every minute. Here you have a time. It's Erev Shabbos bein Hashmashos. It's Friday Faranach. You have a minute. Mishnah tells us, you have a minute between Friday and Shabbos. Look how much the Rebishter accomplished. Look what he did. There were 10 things which the Rebishter was able, the Mishnah lists them. 10 various things which were used in various times in later years. Items of importance. When did the Rebishter create them? In such a time which, like, it could be a bypassing time, it could be a time which time could pass by and you'll never know about it, and you'll never use it, and you'll never utilize it. The Mishnah shows us the importance of time. And here you should know it was Erev Shabbos bein Hashmashos, and the Rebishter created a list of things and tells us everything which was created to such an extent that the Mishnah also goes v'yeshemerim. There are some that say af hamazikin, that also the spirits of destruction, a mazik, was also created by the Rebishter on Erev Shabbos. What's the inyan of the Rebishter's creation? What's the inyan of creating a mazikin Erev Shabbos bein Hashmashos? Here we are about to enter Shabbos. What is the meaning of Shabbos? Shabbos is a day of rest. Also the time when Mashiach will come. That will also be called the time of Shabbos. The entire era then will be called the time of Shabbos. What will happen then? Then it will be Shavas min hamazikin. Then it will be no more destruction. In other words, destruction will be turned over. It will be a day of total rest and peace, that there will be no longer spirits of destruction. So the Mishnah here is right away indicating that what is the reason why the Rebishter created Mazikin? Not that they should remain Mazikin, spirits of destruction. They should be converted, that it should there's an expression regarding the time of Mashiach, the Rebishter says he will destroy the damaging animal. In other words, what does it mean he will destroy? As it's explained in Chassidus stresses a lot these psukim. that it will no longer be destroying. It'll be there. It doesn't mean that the Rebbe will no longer will take away these animals. The animals will be there, but they will not destroy anymore. The same the Mishnah here is stressing. Af hamazik, and the Mishnah is indicating right away that the Rebbe created a spirit of destruction. However, we are to know what is our inyan, that it should not be a mazik. Our inyan is to see to it that it should not destroy and turn and convert these spirits of destruction, that it should becoming positive inyan. But again, the general lesson which we derive from this Mishnah is the importance of zman, the importance of time, how every minute could be utilized. The Rambam spoke a very, very geschmacky inyan in today's Rambam. The Shia Rambam today, it is the halachas of shchita, the halachas of slaughtering. In the halachas of shchita, is a concept of a treifa. A treifa means, general, a sick behemoth. A behemoth which will not live longer. And the halacha tells us that a behemoth which cannot, a behemoth or a chicken, or any which goes into the category, anything which has to be shechted, which has to be slaughtered, which can be designated as a treifa, which can be identified as a treifa, then we are prohibited to shecht this behemoth. In other words, we are not allowed to eat something which is a sick animal, in other words. A sick behemoth or a sick anything, we're not allowed to eat it. It is considered a treifa. And the Gemara tells us various descriptions what makes an animal a treifa. And the Rambam tells us all of these halachas also. Rambam teaches us what is considered a treifa. Then the Rambam tells us any treifa which secular studies refer to it as a treifa. In other words, however, in Gemara it is not mentioned as a treifa, we do not accept the opinion of those that claim it is a treifa. In other words, we follow only the opinion of Torah regarding a treifa. If Torah considers it a treifa, it is a treifa, and we're not allowed to shecht it, we're not allowed to kill it, we're not allowed to slaughter it, we're not allowed to eat it. If Torah does not consider it a treifa, though physicians, doctors, secular doctors do consider it a treifa, it doesn't affect our halachas of shchita, and we are perfectly allowed to go ahead and shecht this behemoth. What is the inyan of this halacha as far as to interpret it in avodas Hashem and serving the Rebbe? So the Rebbe explains as follows. A Yid is supposed to consult with a doctor. V'rape yerape. The Torah tells us that Torah gives reshus, the Torah has given power to a physician to heal, to a physician to cure. However, when a physician starts giving up people, he doesn't cure him. He tells him that he's in a serious situation, that he cannot be cured. Such type of a position is unacceptable to us. A Yid does not deserve to hear that. A Yid is in Behar-Bechukosai, like we learned in today's Chazarah, in Behar-Bechukosai Tileichu, Vesmitzvah Shmeiru. What is the inyan of a Yid? To fulfill the wish of the Rebbe, to be attached to the Rebbe. And therefore, as a result of that, V'nasati Gishmeichem Beitam, the Rebbe gives rain in time. There's a touch from the Baal Shem that Gishmeichem doesn't only mean rain. Gishmeichem stems from the word Gashmias. All our material needs are given by the Rebbe. So we go to a doctor, and a doctor cures us, and a doctor heals us. This is the inyan of a doctor. However, when doctors start giving up, and doctors start giving suggestions that they can't cure the person, this is not the inyan of a doctor. There's another taich, the Rebbe didn't mention it today, but the Rebbe mentioned it at a previous occasion. I think it has a very strong shaykhs. Gemara tells us, based on a pasuk, v'rape yerape, that a doctor can heal. So the Gemara says, Mikan, from here we learn, shenitna reshus l'roife l'rapes, that Torah gives permission to a doctor that he should cure a patient, he should cure a person. So the Rebbe taiched, all a doctor has permission for is to cure. However, to give up a person and tell him that his situation is critical, there's no cure for him, this is not what a doctor is made for. This is not what the Torah has given permission the doctor to do. All the Torah has given permission, but not for anything else. It seems like this is the same thought which the Rebbe is trying to bring, which the Rebbe is bringing out here in the Rambam. Anything which al pi Torah is not considered a treifa. We do not honor an opinion of any doctor. The same when we're talking about the health of individuals. It's an inyan v'rape to help him, and a person goes to a doctor to get his assistance, to be cured, to be helped. However, to be put by the doctor into the category of a treifa, which means that chas v'shalom, there is no hope for him. He cannot be healed, he cannot be cured. There's no room for that al pi Torah. This is not the inyan what a doctor is for, and this is not what a yid goes to a doctor for. On the contrary, a yid is promised by the Rebbe that he will have long years, arichus yomim v'shanim toivos, long years and healthy years and blessed years, and that his years will be successful. This is what he's given the bracha from the Rebbe for. Behar-Bechukosai, like we just mentioned, this mitzvah tishmeiro, then the Rebbe will reward us. That'll be v'nasati gishmeichem beitam v'nos na'aretz yivula, and so forth, that a yid will be protected. The conclusion of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said that it's an appropriate time to remind everyone that being that we are before Shavuos, as the inyan which the Rebbe spoke about already several times, he mentioned it like Bima when the Rebbe spoke at the parade, that we should see to it that all Yiddish Kinderlach should come, all Jewish children should come Shavuos to the reading of the Aseres HaDibros in Shul. And again, being that we are now before Shavuos, it's an appropriate time that everybody should relate this message to their friends and to their acquaintances, to see to it that all children are brought to shul on Shavuos morning. Another inyan which the Rebbe mentioned, Mother tells us regarding Shavuos. Shavuos, we have to specialize in lochem. In Torah there's an expression how the yontif has to be lashem, to God, and lachem to us. So what is the meaning of it? Lachem means that we have to enjoy the yontif. That's based on this, that is why we have to have a yontif with good meals and delicious meals and all of that. This is how we Gashmis, the people, enjoy a yontif. Regarding Shavuos, there's a special stress in the pasuk on the lachem part of it. In other words, Mari uses the expression Hakol Moedim. Everybody agrees the biatzeres that on Shavuos bein on lachem. It must be lachem, that everybody must have his enjoyment on Shavuos. But it says, therefore, based on that, it's an appropriate time to remind that we should take a seat to it, that everybody should have all their Shavuostic needs. And if there's need to contribute tzedakah, to see to it, to those funds who worry and see, and everybody should see to it, that everybody will make sure that everybody should really have all the needs of Yontif, so that everybody will really be able to celebrate a suitable Yontif, to fulfill the lochem of Atzeres, that everybody should have an enjoyable Yontif.